Hello, my name is Miriam Nyang, and I'm currently a student at the University of Maryland, College Park. For those who are not aware, I'm currently taking a course called Queer Contentions, Explorations of Sexualities in the Black Community. In this course, we are learning about the queer community as well as the intricate details that queer individuals must go through daily. This topic is important because we learn about the queer community through the lens of history, and we also talk about how history has portrayed the queer community, as well as how history has allowed us to understand the queer community. For this podcast, I will focus primarily on the film industry, and the argument I will be attempting to answer is, how does the film industry show queer individuals? For some people, this may sound like a very broad question to try to answer because evidently different films allow for different types of representation. But I want to start off talking about a show that I watched growing up, a show that kind of introduced me to the whole topic of what a lesbian is or what a gay person is. It obviously was secluded to those specific categories, and then later on in the show we're introduced to transgender individuals, but that was where I feel like I really gained substantial knowledge, or really gained an understanding of the fact that we're in a world where people can love who they want to love, people can identify as what they would like to identify. And this show is Glee. It was a show created and produced by Ryan Murphy. If you know him, you know he created so many other shows in film history. Another one that I can think of is the show Scream Queens. So let's get into the topic. And I want to preface by saying that this is a very small example. There are obviously so many other TV shows, so many other movies that may or may not show representation better, but this is just what I could think of when I thought of a show that features gay characters and how those characters are featured and how they're shown and how they're appreciated or underappreciated. Personally, this is just what came to mind. All right, so let's start. So in Glee, most of the queer characters were characterized as white males. The main queer character, his name was Kurt, and even though he went through trials and tribulations throughout the show, from the very beginning, he was still the protagonist in the story. He was still a beacon of light in the story. He was still a positive in the story. He was a symbol of strength in the story. It was not until season 5 where we're introduced to a black queer character. This black character's name was Unique. Unique was a transgender woman, and was depicted fairly different from Kurt. Reiterate, Kurt was depicted as calm, bougie, classy, and Unique had a very different character role. Unique was loud, abrasive, and was not afraid to put up a fight. These characteristics that the writers gave Unique came from very negative stereotypes that are inflicted upon black queer individuals, or even heterosexual individuals. Side note, just a piece of information that I remembered, Ryan Murphy has long been accused of not necessarily racist tendencies, but racially prejudiced tendencies in his shows, so that's something to take note of. And this is not to say that there was any intent of any racist actions, but that's definitely how it was perceived to the black community, especially at the peak of Glee's popularity. Not only are the viewers watching without probably any inclination of what is actually going on, but it seems as though the creators of the show wanted to further perpetuate this stereotype. The black queer characters would get bullied more often. For example, they would get slushies onto their faces, amongst other things like getting blasted on social media, etc. Another thing that was really interesting is that Unique would often get called by her birth name rather than being called the name she identifies with. That is a sense of that is bullying, to be honest. That is prejudice, that is homophobia, that is transphobia, when you call somebody by the name that they have left behind, that they have retired. This was a clear indication of toxic masculinity that was being showed throughout the TV show. The straight men could not stand the sight of it and oftentimes felt like they had to show who they were by demeaning the black queer individuals in the show. According to Garrett Walker's reading, Reimagining Masculinity, he prefaces the meaning of patriarchal masculinity and kind of how it affects the world. According to him, patriarchal masculinity has been seen as this goal to achieve, and individuals have to act in certain behaviors. Some of those behaviors include anti-feminine, heteronormativity, dominance, control, and violence. He also goes on to say that societal understanding of the masculine is learned through the people and social settings in which they are exposed from birth. This is an interesting quote because if you think about it, some people just do not understand, and they were raised in the rigid confines of gender. Aside from what you were born into, Garrett stresses that the media is a part as to why queer individuals are treated the way they are. He goes on to say the media promotes stereotypical, racialized, gendered, and classist tropes, leaving little representation for the diversity of actual lived experience of black people. This article was very interesting because it showed where the issues sometimes stem from. However, this is not to make excuses for those who are carrying out injustices. Another article that was of interest in this class was African American Cinema Through Black Lives Consciousness, which was edited by Mark A. Reed. There are several readings under this compilation, and the one I would like to focus on is from Queer to Queer, the representation of LGBTQ Black in cinema, by Anne Cremo. According to this reading, the strongest presence of queer characters in black films is found during the blaxploitation era. Blaxploitation films include films like Cleopatra Jones, and in this film, the creators used lesbians as dope pushers and gang leaders. Another example is that movies like Mandingo from 1975 and Drum in 1976 viewed male homosexuality as a white man's disease that sometimes infested black men to enforce racist ideologies. These two readings show a different way of looking at the situation. Garrett's reading focuses on toxic masculinity and how it can sometimes lead to a negative view on male queerness, as well as how the media can be a vessel for these negative stereotypes, while Cremo's reading talks about the history of black films and how black queer individuals were depicted in the films. There are many examples that provide a positive outlook as well that is instilled in the end. With all this evidence that is provided in this podcast, I was able to provide a small sample into how black queer representation is shown in the media. From the research that I have done, it is more negative than positive, but I do think that as a society we are getting better. Our home lives are the one thing that really dictate how we react to certain things. I may be more accepting and understanding because my parents raised me in a household that is aware and that gender and sexuality are fluid. However, another individual may not be aware because they grew up in a religious household that focuses on the rigid confines of gender, which is also explained in the Garrett article. All in all, it is all about learning. The show Glee was released in the early 2000s, and at this time, same-sex marriage was not even legal yet. Therefore, media companies and producers feel as though they need to appeal to a certain base to get people to watch. I, along with others, are still learning every day and hope that the media will show their queer characters in a positive light all around. The media is widely available to little kids, and it is important for them to understand the importance of acceptance, even if they are not being taught this at home. Thank you for listening, and I hope I was able to provide some helpful insight into a topic that I have really enjoyed learning about the past couple months.